Morning, folks. Chris in Central Pennsylvania. Today, news reports coming out of South Africa, specifically from Newsroom Africa, give the impression that the United States is amping up the pressure against South Africa, and nothing could be further from the truth. You see, the media are finally just discovering the consequences of friends and family only, and the actions of the South African government in complaining about a global suspension of foreign assistance on January 20th, which Donald Trump put in place. South African politicians decided to play woe is me, why are you targeting South Africa when the entire world was affected by it? As a consequence of that and other statements by the South African government, President Trump, in frustration, finally on February 7th, issued an executive order suspending foreign aid permanently. Well, the consequences of that continue to roll out. The media are very poorly informed about how that foreign aid is applied. One example of that is the news report today coming out of Newsroom Africa, complaining about how the U.S. government is kicking out South African military from the U.S. Well, that's not news. That's simply a consequence of the suspension of aid. So what we're talking about here is a grant program where the U.S. taxpayer gives money to foreign countries, typically low-income countries. South Africa is an exception. They get money under one program called the International Military Education Training, or IMET program. That provides grant money to that country so they can send their students to U.S. military schools like the Army War College, the Air War College, and things like that. As a consequence of that money being suspended in February, that means that no South African military students have any money to continue. Their tuition is no longer being paid at U.S. military schools because there's a cost to do it, and that's paid for by grant. The stipend they get from the U.S. government for living expenses is suspended, and as a consequence of the suspension of assistance, that means suspension of cooperation. So a lot of hay is being made about the ejection of Ibrahim Rasool. It has nothing to do with Ibrahim Rasool. This is a consequence of February 7th. It was just a matter of when it happened. It was going to happen because there's no money, and you can't continue the programs without money. So all South African military students attending engineering courses, NCO courses, Army War College, Naval War College will be sent home. That was a fait accompli as a consequence of the executive order that was issued on the 7th of February. But news media in South Africa are giving people the impression that these are new developments, that this is a consequence of Ibrahim Rasool being kicked out of the country, or the U.S. is angrily coming after South Africa. No. The media should become better informed about how government works and how foreign aid works before they try to give people a false impression about the consequences of actions of the South African government. So that's what's going on here. It's nothing new, nothing new. It's simply people realizing this. In early February, I mentioned this would be one consequence. Not only is PEPFAR money gone, not only is money that was being spent to stop gender-based violence in South Africa, not only is money being spent to improve trade in South Africa no longer available, but also a few weeks after that, the media finally discovered that 70% of all medical research in South Africa is funded by the American taxpayer. 70%. So basically, the government of South Africa does no medical research at all. None. 30%, that's nothing. We carry the load for South Africa's medical research. We also produce the antiretrovirals. We also do the research for the antiretrovirals. Yeah, so when South African politicians say, screw America, we don't need you, we can do this on our own, can you? Can you really do it on your own? It doesn't look like it because you've been leeching off the taxpayer in America for the past 30 years. So maybe a little humility is in order here, and also perhaps a little time for media to do research. Additionally, beyond the International Military Student Education Training, IMET program, where South African military who are here, unfortunately, for this is terrible. Imagine this. You come to the Army War College, you bring your family over here, you're here for 7 or 8 months studying and getting close to graduation, only to be told you have to go home now and you'll never graduate from the War College. What a sad situation for those folks individually. But beyond that, this has another consequence which is not being discussed by the media and is of note and we should talk about. And that specifically is, we also give South Africa traditionally some FMF, foreign military financing. That's also grant money that the South African government can use to pay for training, to pay for exercises, to pay for purchase of military equipment, things like that. Well, that program in the past has been useful for purchasing spare parts for the C-130 fleet that South Africa has. Well, if you're getting any FMF money, that's also suspended. You can no longer participate in purchasing those parts. So in effect, that would mean that the South African government cannot purchase FMF parts from the U.S. unless they come with their own money. But I guess it really doesn't matter given that the South African Air Force is grounded. I mean, I have more operational drones in my house than the South African Air Force has operational aircraft. So not really a major impact as far as South Africa on that one. But again, folks, this is not new. This isn't targeted. It has nothing to do with Ibrahim Rasool. Those are his words. That has nothing to do with this action. And yes, the memorandum from the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, DSCA, was dated 13 March. But that's because bureaucracies move at a glacial pace. This was decided on February 7th with an executive order. It's taken from February 7th until March 13th for the government to take action. It's taken from the memo being issued on March 13th for the South African media to catch up on March 31st to realize what's actually happening. Everything unfolding today is a consequence of the executive order on the 7th of February. It's not new. This is not unique. And I said much of this was coming. It's a shame that people in South Africa don't pay attention, particularly the media, or you wouldn't be making news out of this, because it's not particularly newsworthy. Well, I came out to record on what's typically a quiet country road next to Yellow Breeches Creek, a world-renowned fly fishing creek, which is kind of slow today. But for some reason, I guess because it's rush hour, this is no longer a quiet country road. Cars coming by every few seconds. Anyway, folks, that's the situation. The media are, whether they intend to or not, they're creating a stir, giving the impression the United States government is punishing South Africa when nothing could be further from the truth. There's simply no money there because your grant money has been suspended and canceled and you can't continue. All right, that's how it works. And there you have it. All right, so hopefully South African media will start learning how to do research about the things they talk about rather than simply just grab a few acronyms and, read about a few programs for 30 seconds and then act as if they're subject matter experts, which obviously they're not. Cheers, folks. Take care.